For those of y'all curious about what's going to start happening tomorrow with this whole CDL downgrade through Clearinghouse, what it simply means is that any driver, any CDL driver that has prohibited status in Clearinghouse, their CDL is going to be downgraded. So if you have a Class A, B, or C CDL, you're simply going to have a, B, or C non CDL. You can still drive your personal vehicle. It's not your whole license that's suspended. It's just your commercial driving privileges that are going to be downgraded. And the final rule has been coming for a while now. And you'll see that FMCSA published it to say that a driver that has a program violation and prohibited from performing safety sensitive functions, which is a long way to say driving, by November 18, 2024, as part of new FedReg, drivers prohibited will lose or be denied their state issued commercial driving privileges. Despite where you have whatever state that you have your CDL issued from, they are required to downgrade your commercial driving privilege if you're prohibited in the system. The only reason you're going to be prohibited in Clearinghouse is that you just haven't completed the SAP program. Majority of the time is because in the prescribed follow-up testing program that is issued by the SAP, remember there has to be a minimum of 6 random tests spread over the next 12 months, but it's always up to the counselor that assigns how many follow-up tests. If you miss any of those tests, then once that missed test is reported in Clearinghouse, then you're going to be prohibited. So even if you have your license already back after you took your return to duty test to reinstate your commercial driving privilege, then you'll be prohibited again. But what happened is you still had your CDL, but it wasn't prohibited. Your commercial driving privilege wasn't prohibited. You just were prohibited in Clearinghouse. But to combat that, it's always been an out of service. If you record as prohibited, then you had to be declared out of service until the prohibition was removed. And the only way you can get your prohibition removed is you have to make sure that you follow the SAP program. If and when you ever do test positive on a drug or alcohol test, that you go to all the follow-up testing to get administered and you'll be fine. So what should you do right now? I would just recommend go to your employer if you have any suspicion that you might be prohibited, and I'm going to run y'all through the process, how the query gets run, even though any motor carrier operating in almost the last 5 years should be familiar with this, because Clearinghouse was implemented on January 6, 2020, is when you were first able to start registering, and then it was 100% required to be utilized January 6, 2023. So we're almost coming up on the 2-year anniversary of when no matter what employer you went to go work for, they had to run a query to make sure that you weren't prohibited in Clearinghouse or had any violations. So once you get your system set up, and I've always told everybody that comes through my training that the biggest pain in the ass with this program is actually getting your DHCH admin profile set up, because you got to go through your portal, give someone a permission to have that role. Once you get into the system and get your account set up, it's very user friendly. So you'll go here to the home page, log in, and you'll go up to conduct a query. And remember, each one is only $1.25 to run. And the next step is to put all the driver's CDL information in there. Once you put that in there and all the information is correct, you'll get a green check mark saying that driver's information has been verified. If for any reason you get an X, it's either because the driver's name or something was put in wrong, so you just got to make sure you correct it and run it again. And there's only 2 you can run. Anybody, when you're going to first go work for a carrier, has to run a full query, which shows you all the information that you currently have in your record. And then the limited one is the one that you run once a year to make sure that you're still that you're not prohibited. So another time you'll be required to run a full one. So you got to do it pre-employment, but also if you run a limited one, that's the one you do annually, and you have a driver that's prohibited, it's going to also notify you need to conduct a full query to see the reason why, because all it's going to show you is this result. In this case, right, this is what you want to see if the driver's not prohibited. But if you happen to run a limited query annually and you get the red X and says driver is prohibited from performing safety sensitive functions, it's also going to tell you to run a full query, and then you'll get to see the exact reason why. So then you can communicate that to your driver to let them know. And again, in the last 5 years, every time I've dealt with any kind of prohibition in the system, 99% of the time, it's because the driver missed one of the follow-up scheduled tests that they have to submit to. You can't miss those after you've tested positive, because you don't complete the program until you complete the follow-up testing, which is, again, it's going to be spread out over the next year depending on what your SAP counselor sets up for you. But as of right now, remember, any driver prohibited is not only out of service because the inspectors check that roadside now too, but now your CDL is also going to be downgraded from a commercial driver license to a non-commercial license. So make sure you get this checked as soon as possible, because that all starts tomorrow, because that's the new regulation. Thanks for watching.